I am gaming. I am gaming. I am gaming podcast.
Hey everybody, my name is Ivica. Thank you so much for being on the latest episode of I'm Gaming Podcast. This is a podcast about the video game industry, entrepreneurship, gaming nostalgia, and many more cool things I find to be in the same realm of business and creative ventures. We're on episode 90, which means that we're only 10 episodes away from the big 100. And that, like any other episode, would not be possible without my awesome, amazing, great Patreon supporters. These are the people who support the same podcast through the Patreon platform, and I'm truly and immensely grateful to each and every one of you. Everyone else, please check out their amazing ventures. In the description below, the links are there. You can see what everyone is doing, making, and enjoying at the same time, which is pretty awesome. And again, a huge thanks for being here for me and for I'm Gaming Podcast. If you would like to support me on Patreon, please check out that page as well. Also, don't forget to check out my book, How to Overcome Procrastination Through the Use of Psychology. That's on Amazon, so if you're wasting time, check it out. It might be useful to you. This episode is a game design episode, and it's going to feature a small, short, but hopefully useful dive into the issues of power, or the sense of power versus the sense of dread in game design, especially in narrative game design, but not exclusively so in game design in general. Recently I've been playing a lot of Control. It's a really cool third-person adventure action narrative driven game, a AAA title that's really excellent. I'm enjoying it so far. It has some downsides, but mostly it's an amazing experience for me, and I wanted to focus on its way of kind of trying to balance these things out, which are one side, that sense of dread, the sense of horror and the unknown and danger, versus the sense of power you as a player character have in the game. So let's take this a few steps back and focus on the process of actually creating or inducing dread in game design, which applies much of the same rulebook from the horror genre. So the thing that really kind of reminds me of Control, the whole setup of Control, which is basically that you have this Federal Bureau of Control, a kind of FBI agency of paranormal that is exploring this another plane of reality, which is kind of strange and weird and unpredictable, through a kind of an institutional setup where things like bureaucracy and ritual are all present at the same time. Through all of this, things are left pretty much unexplained or unknowable to a point. This is a classic move from the New Weird genre, and the Southern Reach trilogy, which is a number of books, 3 books actually, from Jeff Vandermeer, Annihilation, Authority and Acceptance, is really reminiscent in my mind to this setup. Here too there is kind of an agency that is exploring a reach domain of the US, which is off limits and sort of infected with something that is unknowable to humans, either alien or from other plane of existence or something like that. In this case, or in both cases, both works of art induce this really feeling of dread and horror, which isn't kind of a visceral thing. It's not in the kind of a first plane of narrative experience, but it's in the background, equally strong as it would be in the first plane, which means that it kind of emanates and emits this sense of things not being normal, things not being okay, and things slowly unraveling to some kind of uncanny and dangerous place. Unlike physical danger, this is something that you slowly build through characters and their acceptance and their perspective of the world outside. The excellent element in each of the successful examples of this kind of world building is that ability to have people function and go about their tasks or desires or missions in a world that is still both slightly hostile, not directly towards them, but to everyone, humanity, or everything that is not itself, and also that still need to go through with it. So it's a process of leveraging power with that ability to understand things. And in games, that's really hard because you want to provide your player characters with power. And through player characters, you want to provide your players with power. The ability to influence and oppose antagonists they come across in the game world. Otherwise, they will feel helpless, and even though that will strengthen the sense of dread, it will diminish the payoff and the ability to actually enjoy the game by feeling helpless. So it's much more complicated to induce a sense of dread in video games than in literature, where you're a passive observer and a passive accumulator of that experience. In games, you're actively involved in it. You have to leverage one against the other, but you have to balance both of them out. In Control, this is actually the point where the game is kind of presenting a weak side for me, is that the amount of power you have with your special weapon and your ability to kind of zip around is huge, and the player character, as a narrative design point of view, has zero true fear from all of that. I mean, not really zero, but really a small amount, because she is exceedingly powerful and getting more and more powerful. With the rise of power, the sense of dread will diminish, because whatever you might encounter, you already know that you can kind of overcome. Sure, the game will probably later on present more and more challenging environments, but her power is also rising steadily as well. That is a good point in game design. That's a linear progression that you want to have in your game design, but when you add the sense of dread to that, it kind of needs to balance itself out. How to do that is difficult, but having the idea that you need to do it is the first step. I'm feeling like the process of Control, game design in Control, diminished the importance of this and focused more on the power than on sense of dread. So those two scales are unbalanced, and the focus is a lot more on the power side than on the dread side, which is okay, but the dread feeling, that whole feeling of new weird, of things not being normal, things not being as they should be, is dropping throughout the game. Even though it starts pretty high, it's dropping, while that feeling of I'm going to go in and destroy everything, kill everyone who is my antagonist, my enemy, is rising. So if you're building horror games that are purely horror games, that want to focus on that sense of dread, think more of things like Amnesia: Dark Descent, which makes its character a lot less powerful, so that they can leverage that sense of dread, that sense of fear. Now, it's a fine-tuning act, it's a fine balancing act that can often go either to one or the other side too much, but you need to have it in mind to actually have the chance to reach it the best possible balance you can produce inside your team and your project. It's not easy, but it's always important to think about these two things as kind of mutually exclusive. The more power, the less sense of dread. The more sense of dread, the less power the player needs to have. It's not easy, but it's something that you should have in mind in setups like this. Control does it. In my view, it doesn't do it perfectly. It tries to do it, but it could do it much better if it wanted to focus on that sense of dread and not that sense of action arcade where you zip around and destroy everybody with your mighty gun. That's all for this episode. Hopefully you found this useful. Hopefully you found this interesting. If you did, please consider subscribing to my channel, liking this video, and of course checking out my Patreon page. Don't forget to check out my book as well. This was episode 90. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great week, and I'll hear you in precisely 7 days from now. Bye bye.